It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a small family gathering at La Piazza, one of those trendy Italian spots downtown, where the dim lighting and expensive wine made everything look perfect, almost too perfect. It was Marie's 40th birthday, and she'd spent weeks planning every detail: the guest list, the decorations, the seating arrangements, each one meticulously thought out. I should have known then that something was off. But I didn't. I just went along with it, as I always did, figuring it was just another one of those things I'd do to make her happy. After all, our marriage wasn't perfect, but we had a decent life together. We'd been married for 15 years, and we had 2 kids, Jake and Ella, who meant the world to me. But over the years, it had become clear that I wasn't the center of Marie's world. Her career, her image, her reputation came first. And I'd accepted that, or at least I'd tried to. I'd arrived at the restaurant just on time, wearing the sharp navy suit that Marie had picked out for me the week before. She'd made me try on 4 different outfits, scrutinizing each one like it was a fashion show. I hadn't minded much at the time. After all, I figured it was just her being Marie, always wanting everything to be flawless. But when I walked into La Piazza, I could already feel the distance between us. Marie was busy as usual, directing the staff, greeting the guests, making sure everything was in its place. I felt like I was nothing more than a piece of decor in her perfect world, just another element of the evening that she could control. And I let it go, just like I always did. I took a drink from the bar, tried to mingle with people I didn't really know, and watched as Marie flitted around the room, her eyes constantly darting to the clock, making sure every second counted. When it was time for the group photo, I made my way over to the area she designated. She had it all planned, her friends standing here, family there, the lighting just so, and her in the center. I stood toward the back, like I always did. Marie had an aesthetic to maintain, and my role was to be present, but never to overshadow. That's how it had always been, and I had grown used to it. But when I stepped into the frame, that's when it happened. Dan, seriously? Marie's voice cut through the crowd, sharp and irritated. Move out of the shot. Your presence is killing the vibe. Her words stung more than I expected. I froze for a moment, not knowing how to react. I couldn't believe she had said that, not just to me, but to everyone who was watching. Some people awkwardly laughed, but I could feel the weight of the moment. I could see the discomfort in their eyes as they glanced between me and Marie, trying to figure out what to do. Without saying another word, I stepped out of the frame and turned away from the group. My heart was racing, but I kept walking. Past the crowd, past the table where my drink was left untouched, and straight out the door. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about the party or the people. I didn't even care about her. I got in my car and drove not back home, not to where I'd been living with Marie for over a decade. I couldn't go back there. Instead, I drove to my office, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. It was in that moment, sitting alone in the dark, staring at the city lights through my office window, that I knew everything had changed. I wasn't going to keep pretending anymore. The silence in my office was almost suffocating, the kind of silence that makes you realize just how long you've been ignoring the truth. I sat at my desk, staring out at the Denver skyline, the lights twinkling in the distance. The world outside seemed so far away, but inside, everything was crashing down. I hadn't expected the words Marie had said to hit me like they did. Sure, I'd known she cared more about her image than me, but to hear it so openly, so coldly, in front of everyone, felt like a punch to the gut. I could still feel the weight of that moment, her dismissive tone, the way she had reduced me to nothing more than a blip in her perfect, curated world. I had tried to make excuses for her before. She's under stress, she's just being Marie. But tonight, something inside me snapped. I wasn't the fool I used to be, and the worst part was, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. I had spent years trying to make her happy, trying to fit into the life she wanted for us. But every time, it felt like she moved the goalposts. The more I tried to show up, the more I tried to make her proud, the more invisible I became in her eyes. The more I sacrificed, the less I mattered. I reached for my phone, the one thing that could connect me to her, but I quickly tossed it aside. It wasn't worth the energy. She had already started texting, calling, sending frantic messages. Where are you? Please talk to me. I'm sorry. The usual pattern. The apologies that meant nothing because they always came too late. She never realized the damage she had done until after the fact. And by then, I was already numb. I didn't know how long I sat there in the dark, but eventually I made a decision. I wasn't going back to that house. I wasn't going to be a part of her carefully constructed world anymore. I didn't need to see her, hear her, or explain anything. I had already made up my mind, but I had to do it the right way. I needed to protect myself, my future, and what little dignity I had left. I spent the next few hours sorting through everything, going through our finances, checking the documents I'd started to gather months ago before I even knew this night was coming. I'd been paying attention even when Marie thought I was oblivious. I knew about the secretive meetings, the late nights, the texts she had hidden. I knew about Ethan, the man who had been filling the space I once occupied in her life. I had suspected, but tonight I had the proof, and I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. The divorce papers were the next step. I called my attorney, David, a man I trusted. We discussed this a few months ago, when I first started to see the cracks in our marriage. David was expecting my call, and he didn't hesitate to get to work. I moved quickly, making sure everything was in order. Financial records, legal documents, and everything else I needed to protect my assets. The prenup was clear, but I needed more than that. I needed to be sure. By the time morning came, I was already in a new apartment. It wasn't much, just a temporary place to call my own, but it was mine. No one else's expectations, no one else's demands, just me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't just a background character in someone else's story. I was free. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt empty, in the way that comes after you've had enough of someone's lies. I didn't care about the birthday party anymore, or the text messages from Marie, or any of the excuses she would try to throw at me. What I cared about was reclaiming my life, and this time I was doing it for me. The chapter with Marie was over, and it was time for me to finally step into the next one. The days following the divorce filing felt surreal, almost like I was floating in a strange, detached version of my life. I went through the motions, working, taking care of things at the new apartment, and answering the endless stream of calls from Marie. But nothing felt real anymore. Every time my phone buzzed with her name, I ignored it. I couldn't bear to hear her voice. The voice that had once been so comforting, but now felt like a reminder of all the things I'd been blind to. The first time the papers were served to her, I was already settled in my new place, in a space that was mine and mine alone. No one could rearrange the furniture to fit their idea of perfection. No one could tell me where I should stand in a photo. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own life. A week later, I received a text from Claire, Marie's best friend. "Marie's a mess, Dan. She's asking to talk to you. Please, will you just listen to her?" It was the same plea I had expected, the same desperate attempt to mend a situation that was beyond repair. I didn't respond. The damage had been done. I didn't need her apology, and I didn't need to hear her side of the story anymore. What had happened wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She chose the life she wanted, and I just wasn't a part of it anymore. 3 months passed before I ran into Marie again. It was an unexpected encounter, one that caught me off guard. I was sitting at a local coffee shop, the same one I had always gone to on weekends, when I saw her walk through the door. She didn't look like the woman I once knew. Gone were the designer outfits and the perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore a simple blouse and jeans, and her hair was unkempt, barely touched by the usual attention she'd lavished on it. She looked tired, worn down by the reality of her choices. When she saw me, she hesitated for a moment, but then walked over to my table. "Dan," she said softly, her voice tinged with a sadness I hadn't heard before. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I didn't need to. The silence between us spoke volumes. She sat down across from me, her eyes searching mine, almost as if she was looking for something that had long been lost. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaky, "for everything. For the way I treated you. For the affair, for everything. I've lost so much, Ethan, my job, my reputation, and I didn't think it would end like this." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel anything, really. The years of resentment, the years of being made to feel invisible had drained me. I had let go. You made your choices, Marie. I made mine. It's done now. I'm not angry. I just don't care anymore. I've let go. She looked down at her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. The woman who had once been so confident, so sure of herself, now seemed like a shadow of her former self. Are you happy? She asked quietly, almost as if she was hoping that the answer might somehow fix everything. I thought about it for a moment, but the answer was simple. Yes, I am. And I don't need a perfect life to be happy. We sat there in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say next. I could see the regret in her eyes, but I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything for her anymore. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Eventually, I finished my coffee, got up, and walked out without looking back. I didn't need to. The person who had once meant everything to me was gone. I had moved on, and now I was free. I didn't hate Marie. I didn't even feel sad. I simply didn't care. I had walked away from her, from the life we had built, and I was better for it. The weight of the years had been lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. The life I had with her was over, but my life, the one that was truly mine, had just begun. The months after the coffee shop encounter felt like a slow unraveling of everything I had once believed about my life with Marie. It wasn't just the divorce that had changed me. It was the realization that I had spent so many years living someone else's dream. I had always been the dutiful husband, the one who supported her ambitions, who stood by her as she climbed the ladder of success, never questioning it. But in doing so, I had forgotten to live my own life. Marie's public apology on social media came as no surprise, though it was certainly a spectacle. The post was stark, unfiltered, and stripped of the usual veneer of perfection she had spent years curating. Carter and I are divorcing. This is entirely my fault. I had an affair and betrayed the man who had been nothing but good to me for 13 years, it read. She didn't hold back. She acknowledged her mistakes and even admitted that her obsession with her own ego had led to the collapse of our marriage. That last line, though, hit differently. I chose my ego over my marriage, and now I'm facing the consequences. It was painful, but there was a certain sense of closure in it for me. The world saw her for who she was, not the flawless image she had worked so hard to create. I hadn't expected sympathy, and I didn't receive much. In fact, most of our mutual friends distanced themselves from both of us. Marie's social media following plummeted, and soon enough, so did her career. Her agency was quick to let her go, unable to weather the storm she had caused. By the time the dust settled, it was clear. Everything she had built, all the things she valued most, had crumbled in the wake of her choices. Ethan, the man she had once seen as her ticket to a more glamorous life, cut ties with her as well when his wife found out. I found out later, through a mutual acquaintance, that she had to move back in with her parents. The image of Marie, always so poised, always in control, reduced to living in a spare bedroom in her mother's house, made me feel almost indifferent. The person she had tried to become, the woman who would stop at nothing to maintain a perfect image, had lost everything she thought was important. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something that I couldn't ignore: freedom. As for me, life slowly started to feel normal again. I continued to focus on my work, my clients, and the small pleasures I had once ignored. I was rebuilding, but it was on my terms. I'd stopped trying to fit into someone else's narrative. I found new hobbies, spent more time with my kids, and began dating again. The thought of it had once terrified me, but now it was liberating. I had spent so many years trying to make someone else's dreams come true that I had forgotten what it was like to have dreams of my own. One evening, about 6 months after the divorce, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the Denver skyline. The city was bustling below, but everything felt still. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I just felt free. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without constantly worrying about someone else's expectations. I had reclaimed my life. The path ahead wasn't always clear, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone ever again dictate my worth or my happiness. My name is Daniel Pearson, and I had learned that the hardest battles were the ones we fought with ourselves. The hardest lessons were the ones that taught us to walk away from toxic relationships, to embrace who we are, and to never settle for a life that isn't our own. And now, I was ready to move forward, fully in control of my own destiny. 6 months had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations hanging over me. It wasn't that everything was perfect, but it was mine. I had rebuilt, piece by piece, from the shattered remnants of my marriage. The apartment I had moved into was smaller than the house Marie and I had shared, but it was warm and welcoming, a place where I could just be myself. I had traded in the sleek, sterile decor of our old home for a space that reflected who I was, not who I had been trying to be for someone else. The kids, Jake and Ella, had adjusted to the new arrangement as well. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I could see the toll it had taken on them, but we made it work. We had our weekends together, and I made sure to spend quality time with them. I wanted them to know that no matter what, they had my full attention. They were the only constants in my life now, and I wasn't going to fail them the way I had failed myself for so many years. Dating again had been a slow process. At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't sure I was ready to open up to someone new. The thought of letting someone else into my life after everything I'd been through felt daunting. But then I met Claire's friend, Mia. She was warm, funny, and didn't need to impress anyone. She had her own life, her own career, and most importantly, her own sense of self. There was no pressure to be anything other than who we were. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something real, a connection that felt honest and uncomplicated. I didn't rush things. We took our time, getting to know each other without any expectations. It was refreshing to be with someone who didn't need me to be a part of their image. There was no performance, no trying to live up to an ideal. Just two people, living their lives, making time for each other when it made sense. It felt different from everything I had experienced with Marie. There was no drama, no pretending. Mia was grounded in who she was, and that was something I hadn't realized I needed until I found it. And then one evening, something shifted. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling through some old family photos. It was strange, flipping through memories of a life I had outgrown. I found myself looking at pictures of Marie, of the life we had once shared. I didn't feel anger or regret, just a strange sense of acceptance. I had let go. The man in those pictures wasn't the same person who was sitting here now. I had changed, I had grown, and I had found peace in letting go of the past. Marie had moved on too, in her own way. I didn't know much about her anymore, but I heard through mutual friends that she had started working with a new interior design firm. She was slowly rebuilding her career, but her public image would never be the same. I didn't know if she was happy, and I didn't really care. I had learned not to define my happiness by someone else's. The hardest part of the divorce had been the realization that I had spent so many years being invisible in my own life. But now, I was seen. By myself. I was enough. I didn't need anyone to validate me, and that was the most freeing feeling of all. I sat back on the couch, letting the quiet wash over me. I didn't have all the answers, but I was okay with that. Life was no longer about fitting into someone else's story. It was about writing my own, and that, for the first time in years, felt like the right place to be. A year had passed since the divorce, and in many ways, it felt like a lifetime. Looking back, I realized how much I had changed, how much I had grown in ways I didn't expect. The first few months after moving into my new apartment had been a blur of adjustment, getting used to the solitude, finding a rhythm with the kids, and figuring out what life looked like without Marie. It wasn't easy, and there were nights when I would lie awake, questioning everything that had led me here. But as time passed, the doubts faded, and in their place came clarity. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. I had settled into my new life in a way that felt natural, like I was finally finding myself again. The weight of Marie's presence, her constant need to control, had lifted. There were no more late-night arguments about the minutiae of how we presented ourselves to the world. No more pretending to be someone I wasn't to make her happy. I could make decisions based on what I wanted, without guilt or fear of disappointing anyone. And slowly, The emptiness I had once felt began to fill with something better: peace. The kids had adjusted well too. They spent most of their time with Marie, and I respected that. But when they were with me, we made the most of it. Weekends became our time, whether it was watching movies, cooking together, or just talking about their lives. I made sure to be fully present. There were no distractions, no outside pressures, just us. I was determined to be the father they deserved. And then there was Mia. She had become a bigger part of my life than I had ever anticipated. It started slowly, just a coffee here, a dinner there, but as the months went by, something clicked. I wasn't looking for anything serious at first. I wasn't even sure I was ready for a relationship after everything with Marie. But Mia was different. She wasn't looking to impress anyone, least of all me. She didn't need validation. And I realized that was what I had been craving all along. Someone who saw me for who I was, without any expectations, without any games. One night, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city below, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by my past or by someone else's vision of who I should be. I wasn't bound by the image Marie had created for me. I had shed that version of myself, and in its place was a man who had learned to stand on his own 2 feet without needing anyone's approval. Mia and I talked about everything: our hopes, our fears, our pasts. We shared our dreams of what we wanted in life, but there was no rush to get anywhere. I wasn't trying to force a timeline, and neither was she. We were just 2 people, finding comfort in each other's company, learning about ourselves in the process. One day, as I was looking through some old photos, I came across one of Marie and me at a family gathering years ago. I didn't feel anger or resentment when I saw it. I just felt nothing. The person I was in that photo wasn't me anymore. The life we had built together was a chapter I had closed, and though it had been difficult, I now understood that it was necessary. I had learned that it's okay to leave behind what no longer serves you. It's okay to walk away from relationships, from situations that hold you back. I had spent so many years trying to please Marie, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. But now I was free. Free to be the man I had always been underneath it all. Free to live life on my own terms. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need to be. I had let go, and in doing so I had found something better. I had found myself, and that I realized was all I had ever needed. The anniversary of the divorce came and went, and it hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I thought I'd be past it by now, that I wouldn't be so reflective, but somehow it felt like a milestone. A year had passed, and yet it still lingered in the back of my mind like a bookmark, reminding me of everything I'd left behind and everything I had gained. I was no longer the person I had been when the divorce papers were filed. That man, the one who was unsure, stuck in a loveless marriage, unsure of what came next, felt like a stranger to me now. I had rediscovered who I was, and the peace I had found in that was profound. Looking back, I realized just how much I had changed since walking away from Marie. The man I had been, the one constantly trying to maintain a certain image to fit into a role that wasn't mine, was gone. What I had been searching for wasn't a perfect life or a perfect image, but something real, something true. And I had found that. Not in some grand sweeping change, but in the small, everyday moments. In the way I now embraced quiet mornings with a cup of coffee, in the confidence I had rediscovered at work, in the ease with which I navigated relationships without constantly doubting my worth. Mia had been a big part of that transformation, though I hadn't expected her to be. Our relationship had evolved organically, free from the pressure of expectations. There were no comparisons to the past. With her, I didn't feel like I was trying to make up for something, and I didn't feel the weight of anyone else's dreams pressing down on me. It was refreshing. When we were together, it was simply because we wanted to be, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. I spent less time thinking about Marie and more time thinking about the future. The kids were thriving in their own way. Jake had started high school, and Ella was becoming her own person, more independent each day. I tried not to worry about what the future held for them, but I knew the best thing I could do for them was to continue being a steady presence in their lives. They deserved to see a father who was happy and confident in who he was. That was something I couldn't give them when I was stuck in the version of myself that Marie had wanted me to be. I was finding balance in all areas of my life: work, relationships, parenting. And though there were still moments when I felt the sting of what I had lost, I also felt grateful for what I had gained. I had learned to be content with my own company, to enjoy the quiet, to value my own space and time. I wasn't waiting for someone else to fill the gaps in my life anymore. One evening, after dinner with Mia, I found myself sitting in my living room, reflecting on the past year. I had become someone different, someone stronger, and I was proud of that. I had learned the hard way that you can't change someone else. You can't mold them into what you need them to be. But you can change yourself. You can decide that your happiness is worth fighting for, even if it means walking away from something that no longer serves you. Marie had made her choices, and I had made mine. I didn't wish her ill. In fact, I hoped she had found a way to be happy too, in whatever form that took. But I was no longer part of that world. I was building my own. As I sat there, watching the lights of the city flicker below, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I needed to be. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't holding on to the past. I was moving forward, fully and completely, and for once it felt good. It had been nearly a year and a half since the divorce, and in many ways, I was no longer the man I once was. The pain of the past had dulled into something more like a faint scar, a reminder of where I had been, but no longer something that defined me. I had carved out a new life for myself, one that was far removed from the expectations and compromises that had once ruled my world. And yet, despite the progress I had made, there were moments when the past crept in, uninvited. Those moments were rarer now, but they still came, like when I heard a song that Marie used to love, or when I saw a couple walking down the street, hand in hand the way we used to. I didn't feel anger when those moments hit, but I felt something else: gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons I had learned, even if they had been painful. Gratitude for the man I had become and the clarity I had gained in the process. And most of all, gratitude for the freedom I now had to choose what my life would look like, without anyone else's expectations clouding my vision. Mia and I were still seeing each other, and it was surprising to me how naturally everything had fallen into place. She wasn't like Marie. There were no games, no hidden agendas. With Mia, I could just be myself, without pretending to be anything else. Our connection was easy, built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. She was independent, strong, and had a life of her own, but she made space for me without expecting me to be anything other than who I was. I had never experienced that before, and it was a relief. There was no need for me to constantly measure up to an ideal or bend over backward to be a part of her life. She just accepted me, flaws, and all, and that acceptance was the kind of love I had longed for, even if I hadn't realized it at the time. I was also starting to feel like I had a handle on the balance between my career and personal life. After the divorce, I had thrown myself into work, mostly out of necessity, and partly because I wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed without being tied to Marie's expectations. But over time, I had realized that there was more to life than just climbing the corporate ladder. I had learned to disconnect when I needed to take time for myself and my kids, to take a step back and enjoy the moments that really mattered. Jake and Ella were growing up fast, and I did my best to stay connected with them. It wasn't always easy, especially with all the changes in their lives, but I was determined to be present. I wanted them to know that their father was there for them, no matter what. We'd had our struggles, our growing pains, but we were figuring it out together. They had become my anchor in many ways, reminding me of what really mattered. Marie's life had continued to evolve too. I'd heard through the grapevine that she had managed to rebuild her career and was in a new relationship. I didn't feel bitter or jealous. In fact, I was glad she had found a way to move on. I didn't harbor any ill will. I had let go of that years ago. Her choices had shaped her life, just as mine had shaped mine, and I had no right to interfere with her journey anymore. The truth was, I had stopped looking back. The past was exactly that, the past. What mattered now was the present, and the future was wide open. As I sat on the balcony one evening, watching the sunset over the city, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need to live up to anyone's expectations but my own. The world felt like it was full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it would take me. Life can be unpredictable, and sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from situations that no longer serve you. Don't let fear or the comfort of familiarity keep you stuck. Embrace change, even when it feels overwhelming. Your happiness is not dependent on anyone else's expectations or approval. Learn to value yourself and trust your own journey. Surround yourself with people who accept you for who you are, not who they want you to be. And above all, let go of the past when it's time, because the future is full of possibilities waiting for you.